So, pop quiz time. What is insulin's actual job in your body? Is it like option one, delivering glucose to your brain?
Right.
Option two, breaking down body fat? Option three, digesting your food? Or option four, making protein? I want you to really lock in your answer here because, well, your immediate assumption might be hiding a massive silent health crisis.
Yeah, and most people, when they hear the word insulin, they instinctively just choose an answer related to regulating blood sugar.
Oh, totally. That's what we're always taught.
Exactly. But the actual medical reality is option four. Insulin is a protein builder. It's a growth hormone.
Yeah.
And that single fundamental misunderstanding is why a completely normal blood test can be dangerously deceptive.
Yeah, which is terrifying because you could go to your doctor like this afternoon, get your fasting blood sugar tested, have the lab results come back absolutely perfect. And yet, based on the research we are unpacking today from Dr. Richa Tiwari, you might currently be on a 10-year invisible collision course with diabetes.
Right. The time frame is really what catches people off guard here.
Yeah.
Because up to a full decade, a decade before your blood sugar ever crosses that pre-diabetic threshold on a standard lab report, your body's metabolic systems can just be quietly collapsing in the background.
So the high blood sugar is really just the final
desperate symptom, yeah, of a system that actually failed years ago.
Wow. Which means we are essentially looking at the wrong gauge on the dashboard. So that is our mission for you today in this deep dive. We are going to unpack what insulin resistance actually is at a cellular level. We'll decode the bizarre physical warning signs that show up years in advance.
And we're going to calculate your personal risk score.
Yes, exactly. We're going to pause and calculate your personal 10-year risk score right here in real time.
Yes.
Most importantly, we're going to learn how to hit the rewind button. Because honestly, the best part of this research is that the process is entirely reversible. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. So to understand how the system breaks, we really have to look at what insulin is actually programmed to do. We established with the pop quiz that it isn't just a passive blood sugar regulator.
Right.
When you digest food and, carbohydrates into your bloodstream as glucose, insulin is dispatched. And it has a very specific set of delivery orders for your muscles, your fat tissue, and your liver. But the core functional trait you have to wrap your head around is that insulin is an anabolic hormone.
Okay, so anabolic meaning building. Like when we hear about anabolic steroids being used to build muscle mass.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that anabolic essentially means it promotes growth and it demands storage. It is fundamentally a builder.
Okay.
So insulin takes excess glucose and builds fat to store it. It helps synthesize and build proteins in your muscle. It takes extra glucose and builds it into this densely packed storage form called glycogen in the liver.
So it's always building.
Right. Its entire biological imperative is to store, build, and grow. It never wants to waste a single drop of potential energy.
It makes me think of insulin as this incredibly frantic warehouse manager. Like, you eat a big meal, a huge delivery truck of glucose backs up to the loading dock in your blood, and the manager is just running around with a clipboard shouting, don't throw anything away, shove this in the muscle, pack this into the liver.
That's a great way to look at it, actually.
Oh, we have extra. Build a new storage unit out back. We're making more fat.
Yeah, that visual is incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
And, in a balanced environment, the warehouse manager does a flawless job. The blood stays clear of traffic, the energy gets stored for a rainy day, and the body functions perfectly.
Right.
The crisis begins when the delivery trucks simply never stop coming.
Which moves us from normal function to system overload. So how do we trigger that transition into actual insulin resistance?
Well, it really starts with the modern diet. When you consume high amounts of refined carbohydrates and free sugars, you create a massive rapid glucose load in your blood.
A huge delivery.
Exactly. The pancreas sees this massive delivery and realizes it needs more workers on the floor immediately. So it pumps out a huge surge of insulin.
The manager calls in an army of temps to clear the loading dock.
Yes. And initially, insulin just relies on its anabolic nature, like we talked about. It takes that glucose and aggressively stores it as fat, which leads to weight gain. But let's say you have a sedentary lifestyle.
Okay.
You aren't doing heavy physical activity. You aren't lifting. You aren't running.
So your muscles aren't burning through their existing inventory. They have absolutely no use for a new delivery.
Right. Because the muscles aren't being depleted, they begin to reduce the number of insulin receptors on their surface. They're effectively boarding up their windows and locking the doors, telling insulin, we are at full capacity. Do not bring any more glucose in here.
Wait, hold on. If the body is so evolutionarily smart, why would the muscles just lock their doors? I mean, that seems like a major design flaw. Wouldn't it make more sense for the muscle cells to just, I don't know, take the fuel and burn it off or store it anyway?
It does look like a flaw at first,
Oh,
until you realize the cell is actually trying to save its own life.
really?
Yeah. The body is protecting itself from something called nutrient toxicity. If a muscle cell takes in more glucose than its mitochondria can actually burn or store safely, it creates massive oxidative stress.
Oh, wow.
It essentially cooks the cell from the inside. So locking the doors, becoming resistant to insulin, is a survival mechanism for that individual cell, even though it creates complete chaos for the rest of the body.
Wow, okay. That makes so much more sense. The resistance is actually protection.
Yes, precisely.
But that protection triggers this massive four-part systemic failure. Let's map out those dominoes for the listener. Domino one is the pancreas, right?
Yeah, pancreatic exhaustion.
Mm.
Your body is demanding so much insulin to try and force these locked doors open that the beta cells in the pancreas just become overworked. They sustain damage, and eventually they begin producing less insulin overall.
Got it. And then domino two is the muscles themselves actively rejecting the glucose to prevent that nutrient toxicity we just talked about.
Right. So where does the fuel go next?
Well, it's forced into the fat tissue, which is domino three. You've been storing all this excess energy as fat. And eventually, those fat cells expand to their absolute physical limits. They become stressed. Some even begin to die off.
Yikes.
Yeah, and they release highly inflammatory chemicals into your body. This local inflammation coaxes the fat cells, making them resistant to insulin as well.
So the warehouse manager is running around with a clipboard, the muscles are locked, the fat cells are structurally maxed out and throwing off toxic inflammation.
Bro,
What about the liver?
domino 4. The liver, which is your reliable backup storage facility, stops storing glucose as glycogen. But it still has to do something with the sugar in the blood, so it begins converting that excess glucose into fat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, specifically into triglycerides. And it just dumps these triglycerides back into your bloodstream. This is why insulin resistance causes a deranged lipid profile. Your blood literally becomes thicker, sludgier, and just full of circulating fats. Wait, which completely explains the high blood pressure. The heart has to pump infinitely harder to push that sludgy, triglyceride-rich blood through your vascular system.
Exactly. And because of that systemic inflammation and all those locked doors, the glucose finally has absolutely nowhere left to go. It backs up into the bloodstream. And that is the exact
About
moment.
a decade later.
Yes, a decade after the pancreas started overworking, the muscles locked up, and the liver started pumping out triglycerides, that your doctor's lab test finally reads as high blood sugar.
Man, if I'm looking at this timeline, a normal blood sugar test is basically meaningless if I want to catch this early. The sugar in the blood is the absolute last alarm to go off. So how do we actually spot the invisible breakdown? Like, what are the body's actual SOS signals during that 10-year window?
Well, the earliest signals are often completely misinterpreted. The first is extreme chronic fatigue. And people are confused by this. They think, I'm eating plenty of calories, my blood is full of glucose, why am I so exhausted?
Right, because the fuel is stuck in transit. The delivery trucks are parked on the highway, but the actual engines, your muscles, have locked their doors.
Exactly.
Your biological machinery is literally starving for energy while floating in a sea of glucose.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that same mechanism drives the second major warning sign, which is constant hunger that never quite goes away, even after a large meal.
Really? Even after eating a lot?
Yeah, because your brain relies on satiety signals that are triggered only when cells actually receive nutrition internally. Since the glucose can't breach the locked doors of the cells, those cells send distress signals to the brain saying they haven't been fed.
That is so wild. But here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source material highlights physical, visual signs, things you can literally see in the mirror. Dr. Tuori points specifically to changes in the skin.
Yeah, so the clinical term is acanthosis nigricans. It presents as a significant darkening and thickening of the skin, typically around the back of the neck, under the arms, or in groin folds. The skin takes on this velvety texture. And frequently, this is accompanied by a sudden outbreak of skin tags in those exact same areas.
I mean, if I saw my skin getting darker or thicker, or I suddenly got skin tags, I would immediately assume I needed a dermatologist. Or maybe I was just aging. It would never cross my mind to check my pancreas. How does blood sugar change your skin?
Let's connect the dots back to our very first realization. Insulin is an anabolic hormone.
Right, the builder.
Exactly. It is a powerful growth promoter. During this 10-year window of insulin resistance, your body is frantically pumping out massive, unnatural amounts of insulin to try and force those locked muscle doors open.
So you just have a massive surplus of growth hormone washing through your system constantly.
Yeah, that excess insulin essentially spills over, it circulates in the blood, and binds to receptors on your skin cells, confusing them. It basically acts as a fertilizer, aggressively forcing those skin cells to multiply and grow rapidly.
Wow. So a skin tag isn't just a random dermatology issue. It's an internal metabolic spillover. Your body literally has so much growth hormone that it is forcing the skin to sprout.
It is direct visual evidence of hyperinsulinemia.
Mm.
And there are internal lab signs you can catch early, too, like at a routine ultrasound might show a fatty liver.
Which makes sense given the liver is frantically converting glucose to triglycerides.
Exactly. We already mentioned the high blood pressure. But in females, polycystic ovarian disease, or PCOS, is incredibly common.
Is that also tied to the anabolic spillover we just talked about?
It is heavily linked, yeah. Just as excess insulin forces skin cells to overproduce, it can also stimulate the ovaries to overproduce androgens, or male hormones. And that disrupts the menstrual cycle and drives PCOS.
This is all just mind-blowing. But Dr. Tiwari doesn't just leave us with a list of scary symptoms. She provides a specific mathematical formula to calculate the danger. I really want to walk through the Indian Diabetic Risk Score. It scores you from 0 to 100 based on 4 metrics. So as you are listening, keep a mental tally of your points. Metric number 1 is your age.
Right, so age acts as a multiplier for metabolic wear and tear.
Mm.
If you're under 35 years old, give yourself 0 points. If you're between 35 and 49 years old, give yourself 20 points. And if you are 50 years old or older, give yourself 30 points.
Okay, that's straightforward enough. Metric 2 is your waist size, and you measure this horizontally right at the level of your belly button. So for men, if your waist is under 90 centimeters, you get 0 points. If it's between 90 and 99 centimeters, give yourself 10 points. And if your waist is 100 centimeters or more, that's 20 points.
And for women.
Right. For women, if your waist is under 80 centimeters, it's 0 points.
Mm.
Between 80 and 89 centimeters, that's 10 points. And 90 centimeters or more, give yourself 20 points. But why focus on the waist? Why not just have someone step on a scale and calculate their BMI?
Well, BMI is a very blunt instrument.
Mm.
It doesn't differentiate between subcutaneous fat, which is the softer fat just under your skin, and visceral fat.
Visceral being the internal fat.
Yeah, visceral fat is the dense, hard fat that packs itself deep inside your abdomen, wrapping around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines. And visceral fat is highly biologically active. It is the specific fat that releases those toxic inflammatory chemicals, driving the third domino of our system collapse.
Oh, wow.
So measuring the waist at the navel is a direct proxy for how much inflammatory visceral fat you are currently carrying.
That makes total sense. Okay, so tally up your age and your waist points. Metric number 3 is physical exercise. And honestly, the scoring here reveals so much about how our bodies are meant to function. If you engage in 150 minutes or more of physical exercise a week, which is roughly 20 to 30 minutes a day, you get 0 points.
Right.
But if you live a sedentary lifestyle, sitting at a desk all day and on the couch all evening, you get 30 points. I mean, you are penalized just as heavily for simply sitting still as you are for being over 50 years old.
It really highlights the sheer mechanical necessity of movement. If you do not move, your muscles have no biological reason to keep their insulin receptors active.
Wow.
A sedentary lifestyle is mathematically equivalent to decades of metabolic aging because you are actively encouraging the muscles to lock their doors.
The fourth and final metric is family history, which obviously accounts for genetic predisposition. If neither of your parents has diabetes, that's 0 points. If one parent has it, that's 10 points. And if both your parents are diabetic, give yourself 20 points.
So you add those 4 numbers together, right? Age, waist circumference, exercise habits, and family history. The maximum possible score is 100. If your total score is under 30, your risk of developing prediabetes or diabetes in the next 10 years is considered low.
Okay.
If your score falls between 30 and 50, you are at moderate risk.
And if your score is 60 or above, you are currently at high risk of developing diabetes in the coming decade. Just take a second and actually evaluate that number, because if you are sitting in that moderate or high risk category, it feels daunting, especially after mapping out the toxic fat and the systemic failure.
Oh, absolutely.
But the entire purpose of identifying this 10-year window is to utilize it. Insulin resistance is entirely reversible. We can clear the traffic jam and fix the warehouse.
Yes, the physiology is highly responsive. To reverse the resistance, you essentially just walk backward through the dominoes. You reverse engineer the breakdown.
Okay, so step 1.
Step 1 has to be diet. because you must stop the massive deliveries that are overwhelming the loading dock. This means cutting out the refined carbohydrates and free sugars. Instead, you transition to complex carbohydrates and prioritize protein, eating in slightly smaller managed portions.
Right, because complex carbohydrates take significantly longer to break down in the digestive tract. So instead of a massive dump truck of glucose hitting the bloodstream all at once, it creates a slow, steady trickle.
Exactly.
And the insulin manager can easily handle a trickle without calling in the temps or hoarding it in the fat cells.
You blunt the glucose spike, which prevents the massive insulin spike. That's step one. Step two is physical movement. Remember, the muscles locked their doors because there was no energetic demand. You have to create that demand. The recommendation is 20 to 30 minutes of daily moderate exercise, a brisk walk, swimming, or cycling.
So what does this all mean for the locked doors?
Well, it triggers a biological backdoor. When you actively contract your muscles through exercise, the physical mechanical movement actually forces glucose transporters to the surface of the cell, allowing glucose to enter.
Wait, really? The muscle can just bypass the locked door entirely? You don't even need the insulin to get the sugar inside if you're actively moving.
Precisely. Muscular contraction opens a separate pathway for glucose uptake that is completely independent of insulin. You are literally draining the excess sugar out of your sludgy blood just by contracting the muscle.
That is incredible.
And as a secondary benefit, as the muscle empties its internal stores, it realizes it needs to be sensitive to insulin again. It pulls the boards off the windows and rebuilds the standard receptors.
I love that. Movement is quite literally medicine in this context. It's a mechanical override. Which brings us to the final piece of the reversal protocol, tackling the inflammation. Dr. Tewari emphasizes improving sleep quality, engaging in relaxing activities, and actively reducing both physical and mental stress.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, stress reduction is not just generic lifestyle advice. It is a metabolic imperative.
Yeah.
When you are chronically stressed or, when you are severely sleep deprived, your body perceives a threat and produces the hormone cortisol.
And cortisol is the fight or flight hormone.
Yes.
Yeah.
From an evolutionary standpoint, cortisol assumes you need to fight a predator or run for your life. So it commands the liver to dump extra glucose into the bloodstream for quick energy. And it actively prevents insulin from storing it away.
Because you need that energy to run.
Exactly. But in the modern world, you aren't running from a tiger, you're just stressed about an email.
Right.
So that extra glucose just sits in the blood, driving up insulin demand and fueling systemic inflammation.
Right.
Regulating your sleep and managing mental stress literally turns off the chemical alarms that are forcing your cells into a resistant state.
It is an incredibly elegant system once you understand the mechanics. You adjust the diet to lower the supply of glucose. You use mechanical exercise to increase the demand and drain the blood. And you manage sleep to calm the inflammation. You reverse the dominoes.
It really is that straightforward.
I highly encourage everyone listening to take that 10-year risk score seriously. Look out for those misunderstood signals like chronic fatigue or skin changes, and recognize the immense power you have to rewind your biological clock. You do not have to wait for a bad blood test to take action. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into your metabolic health.
And before we close out, there's one final lingering thought I want to leave you to ponder. We spent a significant amount of time today establishing that insulin is an anabolic hormone. It's a powerful builder. And we discussed how chronic excessive levels of insulin force visible, abnormal growths on the outside of your body, like those thickened skin patches and skin tags. It really makes you wonder, if your internal organs are marinating in high levels of this powerful growth hormone day in and day out for a full decade before a doctor ever diagnoses you with diabetes, what internal cellular growths or unseen systemic changes might it be silently encouraging that we can't see in the mirror?